Chapter 1. The Storm That Changed Everything. The divorce papers felt like ice against Elena's trembling fingers as she sat in her car outside the courthouse, rain hammering against the windshield with the fury of a woman scorned. 3 years of marriage, reduced to signatures on legal documents. 3 years of believing she wasn't enough, wasn't pretty enough, wasn't worthy enough to keep Marcus faithful. "You're better off without him," she whispered to her reflection in the rearview mirror. But the words felt hollow. The woman staring back at her looked like a ghost. Dark circles under green eyes that used to sparkle with hope. Auburn hair pulled back in a messy bun that screamed defeat rather than efficiency. The rain showed no signs of stopping, and Elena's ancient Honda was making that ominous clicking sound again. She needed to get out of this town, away from the pitying looks and whispered gossip, away from the memory of walking into her own bedroom to find Marcus tangled in the sheets with her former best friend, Sarah. The betrayal still felt fresh, even 6 months later. She'd used every penny of her savings to rent a cabin up north for a month, somewhere remote, somewhere she could lick her wounds in private and figure out what came next. The GPS on her phone showed another hour through winding mountain roads, but the storm was getting worse by the minute. Thunder cracked overhead like the sky was splitting open, and Elena's hands tightened on the steering wheel. She'd always hated storms, ever since she was a child. There was something primal about them, something that made her feel small and vulnerable in ways she couldn't explain. The road curved sharply ahead, disappearing into a wall of pine trees that seemed to lean in toward her car like curious giants. Her headlights carved through the darkness, revealing sheets of rain that made it nearly impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. She should have stayed in town another night, should have waited for better weather, but the suffocating weight of everyone's sympathy had driven her out into this mess. A flash of lightning illuminated the forest, and for a split second, Elena thought she saw something moving between the trees. Something large and dark that didn't belong in any nature documentary she'd ever watched. She blinked, and it was gone, leaving her wondering if exhaustion and heartbreak were finally making her hallucinate. "Get it together, Elena," she muttered, but her voice shook. "It's just a storm. Just trees. Just..." The Honda shuddered, coughed, and died. Elena's heart lurched as the car rolled to a stop on the narrow mountain road, her headlights flickering once before going dark. She turned the key frantically, pumping the gas pedal, but the engine didn't even try to turn over. The clicking sound was gone, replaced by an ominous silence broken only by the relentless drumming of rain on the roof. "No, no, no," she pleaded, trying the ignition again. "Not here. Not now." Her phone showed no signal. Of course it didn't. She was in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by wilderness that suddenly felt more threatening than peaceful. The GPS had gone dark with the rest of her electronics, leaving her stranded without even the comfort of knowing exactly where she was. Lightning flashed again, closer this time, and the thunder that followed made Elena jump in her seat. In that brief moment of illumination, she saw it clearly. A massive shape moving through the trees, too large to be a deer, too fluid to be a bear. It was tracking parallel to the road, keeping pace with where her car had stopped. Elena's breath caught in her throat. She fumbled for the door locks, her heart hammering against her ribs like a caged bird. The rational part of her mind insisted it was just a trick of light and shadow, but every instinct she possessed was screaming danger. The shape paused at the edge of the tree line, and Elena could swear she felt eyes on her. Intelligent, calculating eyes that seemed to see straight through the metal and glass protecting her. She held her breath, not daring to move, as if the slightest motion might trigger whatever was out there to attack. Another lightning strike revealed the creature more clearly, and Elena's world tilted on its axis. It wasn't quite a wolf, but it wasn't entirely something else either. Larger than any wolf had a right to be, with eyes that reflected the storm's fury and seemed to glow with their own inner light. Its coat was dark as midnight, and when it moved, there was a grace to it that spoke of predator and power in equal measure. The creature, wolf, something else, tilted its massive head, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. For a heartbeat, she had the strangest sensation that it was trying to communicate something, that behind those otherworldly eyes was an intelligence far beyond what any animal should possess. Then it stepped back into the forest and vanished as if it had never been there at all. Elena sat frozen in her dead car, rain drumming overhead, trying to process what she'd just seen. Wolves didn't get that big. Wolves didn't move like that, didn't look at humans like that. Wolves definitely didn't make her feel like she was being evaluated rather than hunted. A new sound cut through the storm, the low rumble of an approaching vehicle. Elena twisted in her seat to see headlights cutting through the rain behind her, and relief flooded through her so suddenly she felt dizzy. Someone was coming. Someone who might have a working phone, or jumper cables, or at the very least could give her a ride to somewhere with cell service. The truck, because it was definitely a truck, big and imposing, slowed as it approached her car. Through the rain-streaked windows, Elena could make out a tall figure climbing down from the driver's seat. He moved with the same fluid grace she'd noticed in the creature, and something deep in her chest fluttered with an emotion she couldn't name. He approached her window, and Elena rolled it down despite every horror movie she'd ever watched screaming at her not to trust strangers in the dark. But there was something about him. Something that made her feel safe even as every nerve in her body went on high alert. Car trouble? His voice was deep, rough around the edges like whiskey and smoke. When lightning flickered again, she caught a glimpse of his face. Sharp cheekbones, dark hair plastered to his skull by the rain, and eyes the color of storm clouds. He was beautiful in the way that dangerous things often were. All barely contained power and masculine grace. It just died, Elena managed, surprised her voice worked at all. I was trying to get to a cabin I rented, but I don't have any signal and— You're about 15 miles from the nearest town, he said, cutting off her rambling explanation with the kind of authority that suggested he was used to taking charge. Road's going to flood soon if this keeps up. I can give you a ride. Elena knew she should be cautious. She knew accepting help from a stranger in the middle of nowhere was exactly the kind of mistake that ended badly in every true crime podcast she'd ever listened to. But the alternative was staying in her dead car until morning, hoping the storm would pass and someone else would come along. And there was something about him, something that made her feel like she'd been waiting her whole life for this moment without knowing it. I should probably— She started, but he was already walking back to his truck. Leave it, he called over the storm. Road crews will find it in the morning. Grab whatever you need. It wasn't a request, and Elena found herself obeying before she'd consciously decided to trust him. She grabbed her purse and the small overnight bag she'd packed, then ran through the rain to his truck. He already had the passenger door open, waiting. Thank you, she breathed as she climbed into the warm, dry cab. I'm Elena. He glanced at her as he put the truck in drive, and for a moment, their eyes met. Elena felt something electric pass between them. Something that had nothing to do with the storm outside and everything to do with the way he was looking at her. Like he knew her, like he'd been searching for her. Damon, he said simply, and the name sent shivers down her spine that had nothing to do with her rain-soaked clothes. As they drove deeper into the wilderness, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that she was leaving more than just her broken-down car behind. She was leaving her old life, her safe assumptions about the world, and stepping into something vast and unknown. She just had no idea how unknown it truly was. Chapter 2. Sanctuary in the storm. The inside of Damon's truck was warm and smelled like leather, pine, and something else Elena couldn't identify. something wild and masculine that made her pulse quicken in ways she didn't want to analyze. The heat was cranked up high, and she found herself relaxing for the first time in hours as warmth seeped into her rain-chilled bones. "Where were you headed?" Damon asked, his deep voice cutting through the steady drum of rain on the roof. His hands on the steering wheel were large and capable, with calluses that spoke of hard work and a life lived outdoors. "A cabin rental about 10 miles up the mountain," Elena said, fishing in her purse for the confirmation email. "Somewhere called Pine Ridge? The owner said it was secluded." Something shifted in Damon's expression, so subtle she almost missed it. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, and his knuckles went white on the steering wheel. "Pine Ridge," he repeated, and there was something careful in his tone. "That's not accessible in this weather. Road washes out every time there's a heavy storm." Elena's heart sank. Of course it does, because this day couldn't get any worse. She pressed her fingers to her temples, feeling a headache building behind her eyes. "Is there a motel or something in town? I just need somewhere to—" "Town's flooded," Damon said matter-of-factly. "Creek jumped its banks about an hour ago. Nothing's getting through until morning at the earliest." The words hung in the air between them, and Elena felt panic starting to creep up her throat. She was stranded, in the middle of nowhere, with a complete stranger. Marcus had always said she was too trusting, too naive about the dangers of the world. Maybe he'd been right about that, even if he'd been wrong about everything else. "Hey." Damon's voice had gone gentler, and when Elena looked at him, she saw genuine concern in those storm-gray eyes. "You're safe. I have a place not far from here. You can stay until the road's clear. I can't ask you to—" "You're not asking. I'm offering." He took a sharp turn onto what looked more like a deer path than a road, the truck bouncing over ruts and fallen branches. "And before you start imagining worst-case scenarios, I have a guest room. You'll have privacy, a warm bed, and a hot meal. No strings attached." Elena studied his profile in the dim light from the dashboard. There was something about the way he said it, the easy confidence in his voice, that made her believe him. More than that, it made her want to believe him. "Why are you helping me?" she asked quietly. For a long moment, he didn't answer. The truck wound through increasingly dense forest, headlights carving a tunnel through trees that seemed to press closer with every mile. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with an emotion she couldn't identify. "Because everyone deserves sanctuary when they're running from something." The words hit Elena like a physical blow. How could he possibly know that she was running? She'd told him nothing about Marcus, about the divorce, about the way her entire life had imploded in the space of a single afternoon 6 months ago. "How did you—" "I can see it in your eyes," he said simply. "That particular kind of exhaustion that comes from trying to hold yourself together when everything else is falling apart." Elena's breath caught. She'd spent months perfecting the art of looking fine, of smiling when people asked how she was doing, of pretending that Marcus's betrayal hadn't shattered something fundamental inside her. The fact that this stranger could see through her carefully constructed mask with such ease was both terrifying and strangely comforting. "Is it that obvious?" she whispered. "Only to someone who's been there." His voice was soft, understanding, and Elena felt tears prick at her eyes. When was the last time someone had looked at her and really seen her? Not the put-together facade she showed the world, but the broken, hurting woman underneath. The truck rounded a final curve, and suddenly they were pulling up to a house that looked like something out of a fairy tale. It was larger than she'd expected, built of warm, honey-colored logs with wide windows that glowed with golden light. A wraparound porch welcomed visitors, and even in the storm, Elena could see the care that had gone into the landscaping, native plants and stone pathways that looked like they'd grown there naturally. "This is your place?" she asked, unable to hide her surprise. "Home sweet home," Damon said, but there was something guarded in his expression now, as if he was waiting for her reaction. He parked near the front steps and was out of the truck before Elena could process what was happening, appearing at her door with an umbrella that shielded them both from the worst of the rain. His free hand settled on the small of her back as he guided her up the steps, and the warmth of that simple touch sent electricity racing through her nervous system. The front door opened before they reached it, and Elena found herself face to face with a woman who looked like she could have stepped out of a Renaissance painting. Tall and statuesque with flowing dark hair and the kind of natural beauty that didn't require makeup, she wore a simple sweater and jeans that somehow looked elegant on her willowy frame. "Damon," she said, and her voice carried an accent Elena couldn't place. "We felt you coming." Her dark eyes shifted to Elena, and something flickered there. Surprise? Recognition? "And you brought a guest." "Elena, this is Luna," Damon said, his hand still warm against Elena's back. "Luna. Elena's car broke down in the storm. She'll be staying in the guest room tonight." Luna's gaze swept over Elena with an intensity that made her feel like she was being X-rayed. It should have been uncomfortable, but instead, Elena felt oddly evaluated, as if she was being measured against some invisible standard. "Of course," Luna said finally, stepping back to welcome them inside. "You're soaked through, poor thing. Come, let's get you into dry clothes and something warm to drink." The interior of the house was even more impressive than the outside. Exposed beams supported a cathedral ceiling, and a massive stone fireplace dominated one wall, crackling with a fire that cast dancing shadows across comfortable-looking furniture. Everything was decorated in earth tones, deep browns, forest greens, warm golds, that made the space feel like a luxury cabin. But it was the people that made Elena stop short. There were at least 6 others scattered throughout the main room, all of them turning to look at her with the same intense interest Luna had shown. They were beautiful, every one of them, in that effortless way that spoke of good genes and outdoor living. Men and women who looked like they could have been models if they'd wanted to, but who moved with a predatory grace that suggested they were more comfortable in the wilderness than in front of cameras. "Everyone, this is Elena," Damon announced, his voice carrying clear authority. "She'll be staying with us tonight." A murmur went through the group, not unfriendly, but definitely surprised. Elena felt heat creep up her neck as 6 pairs of eyes studied her with varying degrees of curiosity and speculation. "I don't want to intrude," she said quickly. "If this is a bad time—" "Nonsense," Luna interrupted smoothly. "Any friend of Damon's is welcome here. Isn't that right?" The question was clearly directed at the group, and Elena watched as they exchanged glances loaded with meaning she couldn't interpret. Finally, a man with sandy hair and laugh lines around his eyes stepped forward. "Absolutely," he said with a grin that transformed his face from handsome to devastating. "I'm Jake. That's my wife Sarah." He gestured to a petite blonde who waved cheerfully. "And this motley crew includes Marcus, David, Anna, and Tom." Elena's smile froze on her face. "Marcus?" The man in question rose from his spot by the fire, and Elena's heart lurched. He was nothing like her ex-husband, where her Marcus had been soft around the middle with thinning brown hair and weak features. This Marcus was tall and lean with dark skin and intelligent brown eyes, but the name still hit her like a slap. "Not the Marcus you're thinking of," Damon said quietly, and Elena realized her reaction had been more obvious than she'd intended. His hand found her elbow, steadying her. "Come on. Let's get you settled." He guided her up a set of stairs that led to a loft area overlooking the main room, then down a hallway lined with closed doors. The guest room he showed her into was simple but comfortable. A queen-sized bed with a handmade quilt, a dresser topped with fresh wildflowers, and French doors that opened onto a small balcony overlooking the forest. "There's a bathroom through that door," Damon said, pointing to a panel she hadn't noticed. "Towels in the cabinet, and Luna will bring you some dry clothes. Take your time getting comfortable. When you're ready, come back downstairs and we'll find you something to eat." He started to leave, then paused in the doorway. "Elena?" "Yes?" "Whatever you're running from, it can't reach you here." The quiet conviction in his voice made Elena's throat tight with unexpected emotion. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak, and he disappeared into the hallway, leaving her alone with her racing thoughts. As she peeled off her wet clothes and stepped into the luxurious bathroom, Elena tried to process everything that had happened in the past few hours. This morning, she'd been Elena Martinez, recently divorced graphic designer trying to pick up the pieces of her shattered life. Now she was Elena Martinez, mysterious houseguest of a man who made her pulse race and her common sense take a vacation. A soft knock on the bathroom door interrupted her musings. "Elena, it's Luna. I have some dry clothes for you." Elena wrapped herself in a towel and cracked the door open. Luna stood in the hallway holding a stack of clothing. Soft-looking jeans, a cream-colored sweater, and underthings that looked suspiciously like they might actually fit her. "Thank you," Elena said, accepting the clothes. "These look perfect." "But how did you—" "Lucky guess," Luna said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Take your time. The storm isn't going anywhere, and neither are we." As Elena got dressed, she found herself wondering about the group downstairs. They all seemed close, like family, but there was something else there. An undercurrent of something. The way they'd all looked at her when Damon introduced her, the loaded glances, the sense that they were all part of some secret she wasn't privy to. And then there was Damon himself. The way he'd appeared just when she needed him most. As if he'd been specifically looking for stranded motorists in the middle of a storm. The way he moved with that same fluid grace she'd noticed in the creature by her car. The way he seemed to command respect from everyone in the house without saying a word. Elena caught sight of herself in the bathroom mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back at her. Luna's clothes fit perfectly, and the warm colors brought out the green in her eyes and the auburn highlights in her hair. She looked alive. More alive than she'd felt in months. Maybe that was what happened when you stepped outside your comfort zone. Maybe that was what happened when you let a beautiful stranger rescue you from a storm and take you home to his found family in the middle of the wilderness. Or maybe, a voice whispered in the back of her mind, that was what happened when you stumbled into a world where nothing was quite what it seemed. Elena took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and went downstairs to find out. Chapter 3. Secrets in the Shadows. The scene that greeted Elena when she returned to the main room was so domestic, it almost made her forget the strangeness of her situation. Jake and Sarah were curled up together on one of the sofas, her feet in his lap while he absently massaged them. Anna and Tom were playing what looked like a complex card game at the dining table, their good-natured bickering filling the air with warmth. Marcus stood near the fire, reading a thick book that looked older than Elena herself. It could have been any group of friends spending a cozy evening together, except for the way they all went silent when she appeared. Not hostile, but watchful. Like they were waiting to see what she would do, how she would fit into their carefully balanced dynamic. "There she is," Damon said, appearing from what Elena assumed was the kitchen with a steaming mug in his hands. Hot chocolate, with just a touch of something stronger to take the edge off. Elena accepted the mug gratefully, inhaling the rich scent of chocolate and whiskey. The first sip sent warmth spreading through her chest, and she sighed with pleasure before she could stop herself. "Good?" Damon asked, and there was something in his expression, satisfaction maybe, that made her pulse quicken. "Perfect," she admitted. "Thank you For everything. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't found another way, Sarah interrupted with a bright smile. You seem like the type who always finds another way. It was a kind thing to say, but Elena felt her cheeks burn. If only they knew how close she'd come to falling apart completely over the past few months. How many nights she'd lain awake wondering if she was strong enough to rebuild her life from scratch. I don't know about that, Elena said quietly. I feel like I've been stumbling from one disaster to the next lately. Divorce? Luna asked gently, and Elena's head snapped up in surprise. How did you... Ring tan line, Jake explained with a sympathetic smile. And that look every recently divorced person gets when they're trying to figure out who they are, now that they're not half of a couple anymore. Elena looked down at her left hand, where a pale band of skin still marked where her wedding ring had been. She'd stopped wearing it months ago, but apparently the evidence lingered. 3 years, she said, not sure why she was sharing this with a group of strangers. I thought we were happy. I thought we were building something together. And then I came home early from a work trip and found him with my best friend in our bed. The words hung in the air, and Elena immediately regretted them. These people didn't need to hear about her messy personal drama. They were just being polite to a stranded traveler. But instead of the awkward silence she expected, she was met with understanding murmurs and sympathetic expressions. Betrayal, Marcus said quietly, looking up from his book. There's nothing quite like it. The way it makes you question everything you thought you knew about yourself and the people you trusted. It gets easier, Anna added, her voice warm with compassion. Not the missing them part, but the doubting yourself part. You start to remember who you were before you became part of an us. Elena felt tears prick at her eyes. She'd had friends before the divorce, of course, but most of them had taken sides or simply drifted away when her life became complicated. She hadn't realized how much she'd missed being part of a group that felt safe to be vulnerable with. How long has it been? Tom asked gently. 6 months since I found them together. The divorce was finalized this morning. Elena took another sip of her hot chocolate, using the mug to hide her expression. I was supposed to be celebrating my newfound freedom with a month in a mountain cabin, figuring out what comes next. And instead, you're stranded with a bunch of strangers who are probably way too interested in your personal business, Damon said, but his tone was teasing rather than apologetic. Strangers who gave me shelter, dry clothes, and the best hot chocolate I've ever tasted, Elena corrected. I'm not exactly in a position to complain. What do you do for work? Sarah asked, clearly trying to steer the conversation toward lighter territory. Graphic design, mostly freelance now. I used to work for an agency in the city, but after everything fell apart, I decided I needed a change of pace. Elena settled into the armchair closest to the fire, surprised by how comfortable she felt despite being surrounded by people she'd known for less than 2 hours. What about all of you? Do you live here year-round? Another one of those loaded glances passed between the group members, and Elena felt that familiar prickle of awareness that she was missing something important. We're consultants, Jake said finally. Outdoor survival, wilderness management, that sort of thing. We travel a lot for work, but this is our home base. It was a perfectly reasonable answer, but something about the way he said it made Elena think there was more to the story. These people moved like soldiers, or maybe like predators who'd learned to walk upright. There was a contained energy about all of them, as if they were constantly ready for action. Must be nice, living so close to nature, Elena said. I've spent so much time in the city, I'd forgotten what real quiet sounds like. There's no such thing as quiet in the wilderness, Damon said, settling onto the sofa across from her chair. Just different kinds of noise. You learn to read the forest like other people read books. Every sound tells you something about what's happening around you. What kind of sounds? Elena found herself genuinely curious. There was something about the way he talked about the wilderness that made it seem less like a place and more like a living entity. Wind through different types of trees makes different music, he said, his voice taking on a almost hypnotic quality. Pine sounds different from oak, and you can tell how strong the wind is, what direction it's coming from. Animal calls change depending on the weather, the season, whether they're hunting or being hunted. And the dangerous sounds? Elena asked, thinking of the creature she'd seen near her car. Damon's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. What makes you think there are dangerous sounds? Elena hesitated, suddenly feeling foolish. On the road tonight, before my car broke down, I thought I saw something in the trees. Something big. I know it was probably just shadows in my imagination, but... What did it look like? Luna asked sharply, and Elena was surprised by the intensity in her voice. Like a wolf, but larger than any wolf should be. And the way it moved... Elena shook her head. It's stupid. I was stressed and scared. And storms make everything look weird. The silence that followed her words was deafening. Elena looked around the room and realized that every single person was staring at her with expressions ranging from surprise to something that looked almost like fear. What? She asked, her heart beginning to pound. What is it? Wolves don't usually come this close to human settlements, Tom said carefully. Especially not in weather like this. You think I actually saw something? Elena's voice came out smaller than she intended. This is mountain country, Damon said, but his tone was oddly flat. Lots of wildlife. Bears, mountain lions, deer. Easy to mistake one for another in low light. Elena nodded, but she could tell he didn't believe his own explanation any more than she did. There had been something distinctly unanimal about the creature she'd seen. Something intelligent and purposeful that had nothing to do with normal wildlife behavior. Thunder crashed overhead, loud enough to rattle the windows, and Elena jumped. The lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely, plunging the room into darkness, broken only by the dancing flames in the fireplace. Generator will kick in a second, Jake said calmly. But Elena noticed that none of them seemed particularly surprised or concerned by the power outage. She was right. Less than 30 seconds later, the lights came back on, steady and bright. Happens a lot during storms, Sarah explained. We're pretty much off the grid up here. But Elena was no longer listening to explanations about generators and electrical systems. In those 30 seconds of darkness, she could have sworn she'd heard something. Not from outside, where the storm continued to rage, but from inside the house. The soft whisper of movement, of bodies shifting positions in ways that shouldn't have been possible in complete darkness. When the lights came back on, everyone was sitting exactly where they'd been before the outage. But Elena couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. Some invisible dynamic had shifted while she couldn't see what was happening. I should probably let you all get back to your evening, she said, suddenly feeling like an intruder. I'm sure you weren't planning on entertaining house guests tonight. You're not a house guest, Damon said firmly. You're someone who needed help, and we're glad we could provide it. Stay as long as you want. Besides, Anna added with a grin, it's been ages since we had someone new to talk to. We're probably boring each other to tears at this point. Speak for yourself, Marcus muttered, earning good-natured jeers from the group. Despite their warm reassurances, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that she'd stumbled into something much more complicated than a simple case of Good Samaritans helping a stranded motorist. These people were hiding something big enough that they all seemed to be in on it. The question was whether that something was dangerous to her, or if she was just being paranoid after months of having her trust systematically destroyed by the people who were supposed to love her most. The guest room has everything you need, Luna said, rising gracefully from her spot by the fire. extra blankets in the closet if you get cold, and there's a bell on the nightstand if you need anything during the night." "A bell?" "Old house," Damon explained. "The rooms are spread out, and sometimes it's hard to hear if someone calls for help." It was another perfectly reasonable explanation that somehow felt like only part of the truth. Elena nodded and said her goodnights, accepting warm hugs from Sarah and Anna, friendly nods from the men, and a strange, searching look from Luna that made her feel like she was being memorized. Damon walked her to the stairs, his hand once again settling naturally on the small of her back. The gesture was protective rather than possessive, but it sent heat spiraling through Elena's nervous system nonetheless. "Thank you again," she said when they reached the guest room door. "I know having a stranger show up during a storm isn't exactly ideal." "You're not a stranger," he said quietly, and the conviction in his voice made her breath catch. "Not to us." Before Elena could ask what he meant by that, he'd brushed a soft kiss against her forehead and disappeared back down the hallway, leaving her standing in the doorway with her heart racing and her mind spinning with questions she didn't know how to ask. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. In the space of a few hours, she'd gone from feeling completely alone in the world to being surrounded by people who seemed genuinely glad to have her there. It should have been comforting. Instead, as Elena got ready for bed and listened to the muted sounds of conversation from downstairs, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd walked into a story that had already begun without her, and that tomorrow would bring revelations she wasn't prepared for. Outside her window, the storm continued to rage, and somewhere in the darkness beyond the glass, Elena was almost certain she could hear howling. Chapter 4. Morning Revelations. Elena woke to sunlight streaming through her windows and the rich scent of coffee drifting up from the kitchen below. For a moment, she was disoriented, caught between the familiar anxiety of her usual morning routine and the strange comfort of waking up somewhere that felt oddly like home. The storm had passed during the night, leaving behind a world washed clean and sparkling. Through the French doors, Elena could see the forest stretching away toward distant mountains, every tree and rock crystal clear in the morning light. It was breathtakingly beautiful, the kind of wilderness that made her understand why people gave up city life to disappear into the mountains. A soft knock on her door interrupted her contemplation of the view. "Elena? Are you awake?" Luna's voice was warm and welcoming. "Come in," Elena called, pulling on the robe she'd found hanging in the closet. Luna appeared with a steaming cup of coffee and what looked like fresh muffins on a tray. "I thought you might want something to start your day. The others are already up and about." "You didn't have to," Elena began, but Luna waved off her protests. "It's my pleasure. Besides, I wanted to check on you. How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in months," Elena admitted, accepting the coffee gratefully. The first sip was perfect, strong but not bitter, with just a hint of sweetness. "This is incredible." "Thank you." "Damon went out early to check on your car," Luna said, settling into the chair by the window. "The road's still flooded, but it should be passable by this afternoon." Elena felt a strange pang of disappointment at the thought of leaving so soon, which was ridiculous. These people had been nothing but kind to her, but she barely knew them. The smart thing would be to get her car running and continue to her original destination, to spend the rest of her month-long retreat processing her divorce and planning her new life. "That's good news," she said, hoping her voice sounded more convincing than it felt to her. Luna studied her with those dark, knowing eyes. "Is it?" The question caught Elena off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you have the look of someone who's been drifting for a while. Someone who's forgotten what it feels like to be part of something bigger than herself." Luna's voice was gentle but perceptive. "Sometimes the universe puts us exactly where we need to be. even if it's not where we plan to go. Elena felt her cheeks heat. Was she really so transparent? I've never been very good at taking hints from the universe. Maybe you just haven't been listening to the right signals. Luna smiled. But there was something serious in her expression. Elena, can I ask you something personal? I guess. Have you ever felt like you don't quite fit in the normal world? Like there's something inside you that's different from other people? Something you can't quite name? The question hit Elena like a physical blow. How could Luna possibly know about the restlessness that had plagued her for as long as she could remember? The way she'd always felt like she was pretending to be someone she wasn't, even in her own life? The strange dreams that left her waking with her heart racing and the taste of wild air in her mouth? How did you know that? Elena whispered. Luna's expression softened with something that looked like sympathy. Because I used to feel the same way. We all did, before we found our true family. What do you mean? Before Luna could answer, voices drifted up from downstairs, raised in what sounded like an argument. Elena caught fragments. Too dangerous. She's not ready. Damon's decision. Luna's face went carefully blank. I should go see what that's about. Why don't you get dressed and come down when you're ready? I have a feeling today is going to be illuminating. She left Elena alone with her spinning thoughts and half-answered questions. As Elena got dressed in clothes that fit her perfectly despite Luna claiming they were a lucky guess, she couldn't shake the feeling that everyone in this house knew something about her that she didn't know about herself. When she made her way downstairs, she found the group gathered in what looked like a heated discussion that stopped abruptly when she appeared. Damon stood near the fireplace, his posture tense and defensive, while the others were arrayed around the room in various states of concern and disagreement. Good morning, Elena said tentatively, and the forced smiles she received in return did nothing to ease her growing anxiety. Morning, Damon said, his voice carefully neutral. I checked on your car. The engine's flooded, but it should dry out in a few hours. The road's still impassable, though. How much longer do you think? Elena asked, though she wasn't sure she really wanted to know. Could be a day or two, Jake said, shooting a meaningful look at Damon. These mountain roads take time to clear after a storm like that. Elena nodded, but she could feel the undercurrents of tension in the room like a living thing. Whatever they'd been arguing about, it involved her. She was sure of it. Elena, Luna said carefully, we need to talk to you about something. About what you saw last night. The wolf? Elena felt her stomach clench. I told you, I was probably just... You weren't imagining it, Damon interrupted, his voice rough. And it wasn't exactly a wolf. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Elena looked around the room at faces that were suddenly very serious, very intent, and felt the bottom drop out of her world. What are you saying? She asked, though part of her already knew. Part of her had known from the moment she'd locked eyes with that creature in the forest. We're saying, Anna said gently, that there are things in this world that most people don't know about. Things that live alongside the human world but stay hidden from it. Like what? Elena's voice came out as barely a whisper. Damon stepped forward, his eyes never leaving hers. Like us. Elena felt her knees go weak. She groped for the back of a chair, using it to steady herself as the room seemed to tilt around her. Us. We're shifters, Elena, Sarah said softly. Werewolves, if you want to use the old term. We can change between human and wolf form. That's impossible, Elena said automatically, even as her rational mind started connecting dots she didn't want to connect. The way they all moved with that predatory grace. The way they'd reacted when she'd mentioned seeing the creature. The way Damon had appeared just when she needed him, as if he'd been tracking her. Is it? Marcus asked gently. Deep down, in your gut, does it really feel impossible to you? Elena opened her mouth to say yes. Of course it was impossible. Werewolves were mythology, and fairy tales and late-night horror movies. But the words wouldn't come. Because deep down, in a place she'd been trying to ignore for most of her life, it didn't feel impossible at all. It felt like coming home. The creature I saw, she said slowly. That was one of you? That was me, Damon said, and his voice was steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. I was patrolling the territory when I caught your scent. I followed you, made sure you were safe. My scent? Elena's head was spinning. But I was in a car. How could you? Our senses are much stronger in wolf form, Luna explained. We can track scents for miles, hear heartbeats, sense emotions. Sense emotions, Elena repeated faintly. No wonder he'd known she was running from something. No wonder they'd all seemed to see right through her carefully constructed mask. Elena, Tom said carefully, there's something else you need to know. Something about why Damon was patrolling that particular stretch of road last night. Tom, Damon warned, but the other man pressed on. She has a right to know. We've all been feeling it for weeks now. The pull, the sense that something was coming. Someone was coming. What kind of pull? Elena asked, though she was starting to suspect she already knew. She'd been feeling restless for weeks, drawn northward by something she couldn't name. It was why she'd chosen the mountain cabin, why she'd driven through the storm despite every rational voice telling her to wait. Mate bond, Sarah said simply. When werewolves find their destined partner, there's a connection that calls to both of them. Usually it's strongest when they're near each other, but sometimes the bond is strong enough to call across great distances. Damon finished, his eyes locked on Elena's. Sometimes fate decides to take a hand. Elena felt the world tilt again, but this time it wasn't from shock. It was from recognition. From the sudden understanding that the empty ache she'd carried for as long as she could remember wasn't just loneliness or dissatisfaction with her life. It was the absence of something she'd never even known she was looking for. Mate bond, she whispered. You're saying that I'm my mate, Damon said simply. If you'll have me. The honesty in his voice, the careful hope, made Elena's chest tight with emotion. This was insane. 12 hours ago, she'd been a normal woman with normal problems. Now she was apparently the destined partner of a werewolf who lived in the mountains with his pack. I need some air, she said suddenly, feeling like the walls were closing in on her. She stumbled toward the front door, vaguely aware of the concerned voices calling after her. But it was Damon's footsteps she heard following her onto the porch. Damon's presence she felt at her back as she gripped the railing and tried to make sense of a world that had just turned inside out. I know it's a lot, he said quietly. I know this isn't what you were expecting when you left home yesterday. A lot? Elena laughed, but there was no humor in it. Damon, you just told me that werewolves are real, that you're one of them, and that some cosmic force has decided we're supposed to be together. I think a lot might be an understatement. I know. He moved to stand beside her at the railing, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. But Elena, look at me. She turned reluctantly and found herself caught by the intensity in his storm-gray eyes. Tell me, he said softly, that this doesn't feel right to you. Tell me that being here with us doesn't feel more like home than anywhere you've ever been. Elena opened her mouth to deny it, to say that of course it didn't feel like home. She'd known these people for less than 24 hours. But the words wouldn't come. Because he was right. Despite the impossibility of everything she'd just learned, despite the fact that her entire understanding of reality had just been shattered, She felt more herself here than she had in years. "That doesn't mean anything," she said weakly. "I'm vulnerable right now, going through a major life change. It's natural that I'd be drawn to people who are being kind to me." "Is it?" Damon asked. "Elena, when you were married, did you ever feel like you were sleepwalking through your own life? Like you were playing a role that didn't quite fit?" The question hit too close to home. Elena had felt exactly like that for most of her marriage, like she was pretending to be the kind of woman Marcus wanted, the kind of woman who was satisfied with a small, safe life in the suburbs. How could you possibly know that? Because that's what it's like for our kind when we try to live fully human lives, Luna said softly from behind them. Elena turned to find the other woman standing in the doorway, her expression gentle but serious. "We can do it for a while, but eventually, the wild part of us starts to wither. We start to feel like we're dying slowly from the inside out." "But I'm human," Elena protested. "I can't be. I would know if I was." She trailed off as Luna and Damon exchanged a meaningful look. "Would you?" Luna asked gently. "Elena, were you adopted?" The question felt like a physical blow. "How did you—" "Yes. My parents died in a car accident when I was 3. I don't remember them." "And you've never wondered about your heritage? Never felt like there might be parts of your history you don't know?" Elena had wondered, of course, especially on the nights when she'd woken from dreams of running through forests, her heart pounding with an exhilaration she'd never experienced in waking life, especially during the restless periods when she'd felt like her skin was too tight and her life too small. "What are you saying?" she whispered. "We're saying," Damon said carefully, "that sometimes the children of shifters are born human, especially if only one parent carries the gene. They can live their whole lives never knowing what they are, never understanding why they feel different. But they're always called home eventually," Luna added. "When they're ready. When they find their pack." Elena felt tears threatening. This was too much, too impossible, too overwhelming to process. But underneath the chaos of her emotions, something else was stirring. Something that felt like recognition. "I need time," she said finally. "I need time to think about all of this." "Of course," Damon said immediately. "Take all the time you need. But Elena, please don't run. Not yet." She looked at him, at the careful hope in his eyes, at the way he was holding himself back from reaching for her even though she could see in his expression how much he wanted to. "I won't run," she promised, and felt something settle in her chest when he relaxed slightly. "But I can't promise anything else right now." "I'm not asking for promises," he said softly. "I'm just asking for a chance." Chapter 5. Awakening. Elena spent the rest of the morning walking the property, trying to process everything she'd learned. The forest around Damon's house was unlike any wilderness she'd ever experienced. There was a sense of watchfulness to it, as if the trees themselves were alive and aware of her presence. More than once, she caught glimpses of movement in her peripheral vision, but when she turned to look, there was nothing there. She found herself at a small clearing about half a mile from the house, where a stream babbled over smooth stones and wildflowers carpeted the ground in brilliant splashes of color. It was peaceful here, beautiful in a way that made her chest ache with longing she couldn't name. "Mind if I join you?" Elena turned to find Anna approaching with 2 cups of coffee and a gentle smile. The other woman moved with the same fluid grace they all shared, but there was something less intimidating about her than the others. Maybe it was the laugh lines around her eyes, or the way she seemed genuinely interested in Elena's well-being, rather than just watching to see what she would do. "Please," Elena said, accepting one of the cups gratefully. "I could use the company." Anna settled beside her on a fallen log that made a natural bench, and for a few minutes they sat in comfortable silence, listening to the stream and the whisper of wind through the trees. "It's overwhelming, isn't it?" Anna said finally. "Finding out that everything you thought you knew about the world was only part of the story." "How long have you known?" Elena asked. "About what you are, I mean." "I was born into it," Anna said. "My parents were both shifters, so I grew up knowing what I was, what I would become. I shifted for the first time when I was 16. "What's it like? The shifting?" Anna was quiet for a moment, considering her answer. "It's like finally being able to breathe after holding your breath your whole life. Like coming home to yourself. The first time is usually uncomfortable, even painful, but after that..." She smiled, and her expression was almost dreamy. "After that, it's freedom." Elena tried to imagine what that would feel like, to shed her human skin and run wild through the forest. The thought should have terrified her, but instead it sent a thrill of anticipation through her veins. "Damon says I might be one of you," Elena said quietly, "but I've never shifted. I've never felt anything like what you're describing." "Sometimes it takes a catalyst," Anna explained. "Strong emotion, physical stress, or..." She smiled knowingly. "The presence of your mate." Elena felt her cheeks burn. "About that, the mate bond thing. How does it work exactly?" "It's different for everyone," Anna said. "Sometimes it's instant. You see your mate and just know. Sometimes it builds over time. But there's always a recognition, a sense of rightness when you're together. And if one person in the bond is human, then they feel it too, even if they don't understand what it is." Anna studied Elena's face carefully. "Elena, what do you feel when you look at Damon?" Elena considered the question seriously. What did she feel when she looked at Damon? "Safe," she said finally. "Like I can stop pretending to be someone I'm not. And there's this pull, this attraction that goes deeper than just thinking he's attractive." "That's the bond," Anna said gently. "It doesn't force you to feel anything that isn't already there, but it amplifies what is there. It makes the connection stronger, more immediate." "But what if I'm not one of you? What if I'm just human and this is all some kind of mistake?" Anna was quiet for a long moment, then stood and extended her hand. "Come with me. I want to show you something." Elena let herself be led deeper into the forest, following deer paths and creek beds until they reached another clearing, this one dominated by a circle of standing stones that looked ancient and weathered. The air here felt different, charged with something Elena couldn't identify, but that made her skin tingle. "This is sacred ground," Anna said softly. "A place where the veil between worlds is thin. If there's shifter blood in you, you'll feel it here." Elena stepped into the circle of stones and immediately gasped. It was like stepping into an electric field. Every nerve ending in her body came alive, and she could swear she heard whispers in the wind, voices speaking in a language she didn't recognize but somehow understood. More than that, she could smell things she'd never noticed before. The rich loam of the forest floor, the musk of animals that had passed this way, the lingering sense of Damon and the others from previous visits to this place. Her hearing seemed sharper too. She could distinguish between the calls of different birds, could hear the rustle of small creatures in the underbrush. "Anna," she whispered, and her voice sounded strange to her own ears. "What's happening to me?" "Your true nature is awakening," Anna said, and there was wonder in her voice. "Elena, you are one of us. There's no doubt about it." Elena looked down at her hands and saw that they were trembling, not with fear, but with excitement, with recognition, with the overwhelming sense that she was finally becoming who she was meant to be. "I can smell everything," she said in amazement. I can hear everything. It's like the world just became three-dimensional. That's just the beginning, Anna said with a smile. Come on, let's get you back to the house. Damon needs to know what just happened. The walk back felt different now. Elena was hyper-aware of every sight, sound, and smell around her. She could hear the others long before the house came into view. Their voices, their heartbeats, even their movements as they went about their daily activities. But it was Damon's scent that called to her most strongly. Wild and masculine and comforting all at once, it seemed to wrap around her like an embrace, drawing her home. They found him on the front porch, pacing with barely contained energy. He looked up as they approached, and Elena saw his nostrils flare slightly as he caught her scent. His eyes widened, and a slow smile spread across his face. It's happening, he said, and his voice was rough with emotion. What's happening? Elena asked, though she thought she already knew. You're coming into your power, he said, stepping down from the porch to meet her. I can smell the change on you. Can feel it in the bond between us. Elena felt heat pool in her stomach at his words. The bond between them did feel stronger now. Like a golden thread connecting her heart to his. When he reached out to touch her face, she leaned into the contact without hesitation. I'm scared, she admitted. I know, he said softly. But you're not alone. We'll help you through this, whatever happens. What will happen? Elena asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. That depends on you, Luna said from the porch. Some people shift within hours of their awakening. Others take days or weeks. Your body will decide when it's ready. Elena nodded, trying to process this new reality. She was going to turn into a wolf. Actually transform into an animal. It should have terrified her, but instead she felt excited, eager to experience this final piece of herself. There's something else, Damon said carefully. Something you need to know before you decide whether to stay with us or not. Elena felt her stomach clench. What? I'm not just any shifter, Elena. I'm the alpha of this pack. That means if you accept the mate bond, if you choose to stay with us, you'll be the alpha's mate. The pack, Luna. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Elena understood now why the others had been so surprised when Damon brought her home. Why there had been whispered conversations and meaningful looks. What does that mean exactly? She asked. It means you'd be responsible for the well-being of the pack, Luna explained. You'd help settle disputes, provide guidance and support, act as Damon's partner in all decisions that affect the group. It's a big responsibility, Sarah added, but also an honor. And you wouldn't be alone. We'd all be here to help you learn. Elena looked around at the faces surrounding her. These people who had opened their home and their hearts to a stranger, who had risked exposing their greatest secret to help her understand who she truly was. People who were offering to become her family, her pack, if she was brave enough to accept. I need to shift first, she said finally. I need to complete the transformation before I can make any decisions about the future. Damon nodded, understanding in his expression. When you're ready, we'll be here. But even as Elena said the words, she could feel her decision crystallizing in her chest. These people, this place, this life. It felt right in a way nothing ever had before. For the first time in her adult life, she wasn't trying to be someone she wasn't. She was finally becoming who she was meant to be. Chapter 6. The First Hunt. 3 days passed in a haze of anticipation and gradual transformation. Elena's senses continued to sharpen, and she found herself moving differently, more fluidly, as if her body was preparing for changes yet to come. The pack gave her space to process while remaining supportively close, and she fell into their rhythm more easily than should have been possible. On the third evening, as Elena sat by the fire reading one of Marcus's ancient books about shifter lore, she felt something shift inside her. A restlessness that was different from anything she'd experienced before, deeper and more urgent. "Damon," she said quietly, and his head snapped up from where he'd been discussing territory boundaries with Jake. "What is it?" he asked, but she could see in his expression that he already knew. "It's time," she said simply. The words galvanized the entire pack. Luna immediately began clearing the furniture away from the center of the room, while Sarah hurried to gather towels and blankets. The men formed a protective circle, their presence comforting rather than overwhelming. "What do I need to do?" Elena asked, and was surprised by how calm she sounded. "Try to relax," Damon said, moving to kneel beside her chair. "The first shift is usually the hardest because you don't know what to expect. Your body knows what to do. You just need to let it happen." Elena nodded, closing her eyes and trying to center herself. The restlessness was growing stronger, accompanied now by a strange tingling sensation that started in her fingertips and spread up her arms. "It's starting," she whispered. "We're here," Anna said softly. "You're safe. We won't let anything happen to you." The tingling intensified, becoming almost painful, and Elena gasped as she felt her bones begin to shift and lengthen. It didn't hurt exactly, but it was overwhelming. Like her entire body was being rewritten from the inside out. "Breathe," Damon said, his voice steady and calm. "Don't fight it. Let the change happen." Elena tried to follow his advice, but it was difficult when every instinct was screaming at her to resist the transformation. Her vision began to shift, colors becoming more vivid while her field of view expanded. Her hearing became so acute she could distinguish between the heartbeats of each pack member. And then the real changes began. Her hands cramped and contorted, fingers shortening while her nails extended into claws. Her spine curved and stretched, and she felt herself falling forward onto hands that were no longer quite human. Dark fur began to sprout along her arms, and her face began to elongate. Through it all, Damon's voice anchored her, a steady stream of encouragement and reassurance that kept her from panicking as her human form dissolved and reformed into something wild and new. When the transformation was complete, Elena found herself standing on 4 legs in the center of the room, her new body sleek and powerful. She was smaller than she'd expected, not the massive creature she'd seen Damon become, but elegant and built for speed rather than size. She looked around at the pack with eyes that saw in a spectrum she'd never imagined possible. Their scents told her stories about their emotions, their health, their relationships with each other. She could hear their hearts beating, could smell their individual signatures as clearly as if they were wearing name tags. "Beautiful," Damon's voice said in her mind, and Elena startled. She could hear him without words, could feel his thoughts touching hers through the mate bond. "I can hear you," she responded wonderingly, and felt his happiness like sunshine warming her from the inside. "The pack bond allows us to communicate when we're in wolf form," Luna explained, her mental voice warm with welcome. "You're part of us now, truly part of us." Elena looked down at her new body, marveling at the way her muscles felt coiled and ready for action. Everything about this form felt right. The way her ears swiveled to track sounds, the way her nose could distinguish between dozens of different scents, the power she could feel in her legs. "Want to run?" Damon asked, and Elena felt her tail wag before she'd consciously decided to respond. "Yes," she said immediately. "I want to run." The pack moved as one toward the door, and Elena followed, her new body moving with an instinct she didn't know she possessed. Outside, the night air was alive with scents and sounds she'd never noticed as a human. She could smell deer bedded down in the forest, could hear the rustle of small creatures in the underbrush, could sense the vast wildness of the mountains stretching away in all directions. Damon appeared beside her, his massive black form making her feel delicate by comparison. But there was nothing weak about her new body. She could feel strength in every muscle, grace in every movement. "Ready?" he asked. And without waiting for an answer, he bounded toward the tree line. Elena followed, and suddenly she was flying. Her legs carried her over fallen logs and streams with effortless ease, her paws finding purchase on surfaces that would have been treacherous for a human. The wind rushed through her fur, carrying scents and sounds from miles away, and Elena felt truly free for the first time in her life. The pack ran together through the night, covering miles of territory that Elena was beginning to understand was theirs to protect. She learned the boundaries of their land, the places where other creatures lived, the paths that led to water and shelter. More than that, she learned what it meant to be part of something larger than herself. The pack moved with a unity that went beyond coordination. They were connected, aware of each other's positions and intentions without needing to communicate them. Elena found herself settling into that rhythm naturally, as if she'd been born to run with wolves. When they finally returned to the house near dawn, Elena was exhausted but exhilarated. The shift back to human form was easier than the first transformation, though she was grateful for the blanket Sarah wrapped around her naked shoulders. "How do you feel?" Damon asked, pulling on jeans and a t-shirt with practiced efficiency. Elena considered the question. How did she feel? "Complete," she said finally. "Like I've been missing a piece of myself my whole life and just found it." "That's exactly what it was," Luna said with a smile. "You've been only half alive all these years. Now you know what it means to be whole." Elena looked around at the pack, her pack, and felt tears threaten. These people had given her more than shelter from a storm. They'd given her back herself. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "All of you. I don't know how to repay—" "You don't repay family," Jake interrupted with a grin. "You just show up for them when they need you." "Speaking of which," Damon said, and there was something serious in his tone now. "There's something we need to discuss. Something that affects all of us." Elena felt her stomach clench. "What is it?" "There's another pack in the area," Tom explained. "They've been testing our boundaries for weeks, and last night while we were running, I caught fresh scent markers on the eastern border." "What does that mean?" Elena asked, though she had a feeling she wasn't going to like the answer. "It means they're challenging our territorial claims," Damon said grimly. "And if they're willing to push this far into our land, they're probably planning something bigger." "Like what?" "Like a challenge for pack leadership," Luna said quietly. "If they can prove that our alpha is weak, they can claim our territory as their own." Elena felt cold despite the warmth from the fireplace. "Are you in danger?" "We all are," Marcus said bluntly. "But especially you, Elena. You're unmated, unclaimed, and new to your power. In their eyes, that makes you vulnerable." "But I'm not unmated," Elena said automatically, then stopped as she realized what she'd said. The words had come out without conscious thought, but she knew they were true. Whatever was happening between her and Damon, whatever the mate bond meant, she belonged with him, with all of them. Damon's eyes went wide, and Elena could see hope and joy warring with concern in his expression. "Elena—" "I know what I said," she interrupted, "and I meant it. This is my pack. You're my family, and if someone wants to threaten that, they'll have to go through me." The silence that followed her declaration was deafening. Then Jake started laughing. A sound of pure delight that was quickly picked up by the others. "Well," Sarah said with a grin, I think that settles the question of whether our new pack Luna is ready to defend her territory. Elena felt a thrill at the title. Pack Luna, Alpha's mate. It should have been terrifying, but instead it felt like coming home. What do we do about the other pack? She asked. We prepare, Damon said simply. We make sure our boundaries are clearly marked. We patrol in pairs, and we wait to see what they're really after. And if they come for us? Damon's expression went hard, and for a moment, Elena could see the predator that lived beneath his human skin. Then we remind them why this territory is ours. Chapter 7. Claiming What's Mine. The next week passed in a blur of preparation and increasing tension. Elena threw herself into learning everything she could about pack dynamics, shifter law, and the complex territorial agreements that governed relationships between different groups. She practiced shifting until it became as natural as breathing, and learned to hunt alongside the others, discovering predator instincts she'd never known she possessed. Through it all, the bond between her and Damon grew stronger. She could feel his emotions as if they were her own, could sense his presence even when he was miles away on patrol. But they hadn't spoken about what it meant, hadn't defined what they were to each other beyond the cosmic pull that kept drawing them together. That changed on the 7th night, when Elena was woken from sleep by the sound of howls in the distance. Not the voices of her pack. These were different, unfamiliar, and carried an unmistakable note of challenge. She was out of bed and dressed before she'd consciously decided to move, her body responding to some deep instinct that recognized the threat for what it was. Downstairs, she found the others already gathering, their faces grim with determination. How many? Damon asked Jake, who had been on perimeter patrol. At least 8, maybe more, Jake replied. They're spread out along the eastern border, making sure we know they're there. What do they want? Elena asked, though she suspected she already knew. To speak with the Alpha, Luna said quietly. It's a formal challenge. They want to negotiate. Or they want us to think they want to negotiate, Marcus added darkly. Either way, we can't ignore it. Damon nodded, his expression hard. Elena, you should stay here while we... No. The word came out more forcefully than Elena had intended, but she didn't back down when everyone turned to look at her. I'm not hiding while my pack faces a threat. I'm coming with you. Elena, you've been a shifter for a week, Tom said gently. These are experienced fighters. If this goes bad, then I'll learn fast. Elena interrupted. I'm not some helpless human anymore. I'm the pack Luna, and I won't cower in the house while my family handles my responsibilities. The silence that followed was heavy with tension, but Elena could see respect in the eyes of her packmates. Finally, Damon nodded slowly. Together then, he said. But Elena, you stay close to me. Don't engage unless I give the signal. They shifted and ran toward the eastern border as a unit, Elena marveling at how natural it felt to move with the pack. Her senses were on high alert, cataloging every scent and sound that might indicate danger. When they reached the boundary of their territory, she could smell the other wolves immediately. 8 distinct scents, all radiating aggression and territorial challenge. The confrontation took place in a large clearing that had obviously been chosen for its significance. Ancient trees ringed the space, and Elena could feel the weight of history here, the sense that many such meetings had taken place on this ground over the centuries. The rival pack was waiting for them, 8 wolves of varying sizes arranged in a loose semicircle. They were impressive animals, Elena had to admit, large and powerful, with the kind of battle scars that spoke of experience in territorial disputes. But it was their leader that made her blood run cold. He was massive, even larger than Damon, with a coat the color of burnished copper and eyes like molten gold. When he looked at Elena, she felt exposed, evaluated, and found wanting. This was an alpha who was used to taking what he wanted, and Elena could sense his interest in her like a physical weight. "That's Marcus Redwood," Damon's voice said in her mind, and she could hear the carefully controlled anger there. "He's been trying to expand his territory for years. I should have known he'd make a move eventually." The pack leaders shifted back to human form for the negotiation, and Elena followed suit, grateful for the clothes Sarah had thought to bring in a backpack. Facing a hostile alpha while naked would have been more vulnerability than she was prepared to show. "Damon Ashworth," Marcus Redwood said, his voice carrying easily across the clearing. "It's been a long time." "Not long enough," Damon replied coolly. "What do you want, Marcus?" "Straight to business. I've always admired that about you." Marcus's smile was cold and predatory. "I want what's mine by right. This territory has been in dispute for too long." "There's no dispute," Damon said flatly. "This land has belonged to my pack for over 50 years. Your grandfather acknowledged our claim when he signed the territorial agreements." "Times change," Marcus said with a shrug. "Agreements made by dead wolves don't bind the living." Elena felt a growl building in her throat at the casual dismissal of decades of peaceful coexistence. Marcus's eyes flicked to her, and his smile widened. "And this must be the famous new pack member I've been hearing about," he said, his gaze raking over Elena in a way that made her skin crawl. The human who thought she could just waltz into shifter society and claim alpha privileges. "Watch your tone," Damon warned, his voice dropping to a dangerous rumble. "She's my mate and the Luna of this pack. She deserves your respect." "Does she?" Marcus stepped closer, and Elena could smell the aggression rolling off him in waves. "Because from where I stand, she looks like a liability. Newly shifted, untrained, completely unprepared for the realities of pack leadership." "I can speak for myself," Elena said sharply, stepping forward despite Damon's protective posture. "And I don't need your assessment of my qualifications." Marcus laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Spirit, I like that. It'll make breaking you all the more satisfying." The words hit Elena like a physical blow, but it was Damon's reaction that truly alarmed her. She felt rage pour through their bond like molten metal. And when she looked at him, his eyes had gone completely black. "You want to repeat that?" Damon asked, his voice deadly quiet. "You heard me," Marcus said, still looking at Elena. "She's wasted on you, Ashworth. A female with her potential deserves an alpha who can properly appreciate her." "That's enough." Luna stepped forward, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd been mediating pack disputes for decades. "Marcus, state your terms. What will it take for you to acknowledge our territorial claims and leave our borders alone?" Marcus's smile turned predatory. "A challenge. Single combat between alphas. Winner takes all." "And if I refuse?" Damon asked. "Then we keep pushing. Keep testing your boundaries. Keep picking off your resources until you're too weak to defend what you claim is yours." Marcus's gaze flicked back to Elena. "Starting with unprotected pack members who might benefit from stronger leadership." Elena felt ice form in her veins. He wasn't just threatening their territory. He was threatening to take her. The thought of being under this man's power, of being forced to submit to his idea of alpha authority, made her want to shift and show him exactly what she thought of his threats. "Easy," Damon's voice said in her mind. "Don't let him provoke you. That's what he wants." "He just threatened to kidnap me," Elena shot back. "I think a little provocation is warranted, and if you challenge him, he'll have the right to respond with force. Trust me, please. Let me handle this." Elena wanted to argue, but she could feel the tension in the air like electricity before a storm. One wrong move and this confrontation could explode into violence that would put everyone she cared about at risk. "Fine," Damon said finally. Single combat, but we do this properly. Neutral ground, official witnesses, shifter law. Agreed, Marcus said immediately, as if he'd been hoping for exactly this response. 3 days from now, at the old meeting ground near Raven's Peak. Dawn. And when I win? Damon asked. You won't, Marcus said with absolute confidence. But if you do, my pack withdraws from this territory permanently. No more boundary disputes, no more challenges. And when you lose, Elena said, surprised by the steel in her own voice, you acknowledge me as Luna of this pack and swear to respect pack law regarding mated pairs. Marcus's eyes narrowed dangerously. You have no standing to make demands, little girl. I have every standing, Elena replied coolly. As Damon's mate and Luna of this pack, an insult to me is an insult to him. An attack on me is an attack on the entire pack. That's shifter law, isn't it? She could see Marcus reassessing her, calculating whether she was bluffing or actually understood the legal implications of what she was saying. Elena wasn't entirely sure herself. She'd been studying shifter law intensively, but she was still learning the nuances. Clever, Marcus said finally. Very well. If your mate somehow manages to defeat me, you have my word that I'll respect your position. Swear it, Elena pressed. By pack law and the old ways. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he nodded curtly. I swear by pack law and the old ways to respect the territorial claims of the Ashworth pack and acknowledge Elena Martinez as Luna, should Damon Ashworth defeat me in single combat. Witnessed, Luna said formally, and the other pack members echoed her. With the terms set, the rival pack withdrew into the forest, leaving Elena's family alone in the clearing. The moment they were gone, Damon pulled Elena into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. Don't ever do that again, he said roughly. Marcus is dangerous, and you just painted a target on yourself. He already had me in his sights, Elena pointed out. At least now there's a formal agreement protecting me. Formal agreements don't mean much if I'm dead, Damon said bluntly. Elena pulled back to look at him, seeing the fear beneath his anger. You're not going to die. You're going to win. Elena, Marcus isn't just any alpha. He's been fighting territorial battles for 20 years. He's bigger than me, more experienced, and he doesn't fight fair. Then we make sure you're ready, Elena said firmly. We have 3 days to prepare, and I know this pack. We're smarter, faster, and we fight as a unit. He may be bigger, but he's used to bullying smaller packs into submission. He's not used to real resistance. Jake nodded approvingly. She's right. Marcus relies on intimidation and brute force. But you're more tactical than he is, and you know this terrain better. Plus, Sarah added with a fierce smile, he just made the mistake of threatening Pack Luna in front of witnesses. Every shifter within 100 miles will know about this challenge by tomorrow. If he tries anything underhanded, he'll be the one facing pack justice. Elena felt a warm glow at being claimed so completely by her new family. These people were willing to risk everything to protect her, to defend their alpha's right to lead. The least she could do was help them prepare for the fight of their lives. What do we need to do? She asked. Train, Damon said simply. And hope it's enough. Chapter 8. The Bonds That Bind. The next 2 days passed in intensive preparation. Elena found herself training alongside the pack in ways she'd never imagined, learning to fight in both human and wolf form, studying tactical approaches to combat, and memorizing every inch of the terrain around Raven's Peak where the challenge would take place. But it was the nights that revealed the true depth of what she and Damon meant to each other. On the second night, Elena found Damon sitting alone on the front porch, staring out at the forest with an expression of such profound melancholy that it made her chest ache. She settled beside him without saying anything, letting her presence offer what comfort it could. Are you afraid? She asked finally. terrified, he admitted without hesitation. Not of dying, that comes with the territory when you're an alpha, but of leaving you vulnerable to someone like Marcus. Elena felt her heart constrict. I can take care of myself. Can you? Damon turned to look at her, and she saw the depth of his concern written across his features. Elena, you've been a shifter for 8 days. Marcus has been an alpha for 20 years. If something happens to me tomorrow... Nothing's going to happen to you, Elena interrupted fiercely. I won't let it. You might not have a choice. Elena was quiet for a moment, processing the very real possibility that she could lose the man who'd become the center of her world before she'd even had a chance to tell him how she felt. Damon, she said slowly, there's something I need to say. Something I should have said days ago. He turned to face her fully, giving her his complete attention. I love you, she said simply. I know it's fast, I know it's complicated, and I know the timing is terrible. But I needed you to know. Whatever happens tomorrow, I needed you to know that you've given me everything I never knew I was missing. The smile that spread across Damon's face was like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. Elena? I'm not finished, she said, holding up a hand to stop him. I also need you to know that if you're thinking about throwing this fight to protect me, I'll never forgive you. Damon's eyes widened in surprise. I would never... Wouldn't you? Elena challenged. If Marcus offered to leave me alone in exchange for your territory, wouldn't you consider it? The silence that followed was answer enough. I thought so, Elena said sadly. Damon, I appreciate that you want to protect me. But I didn't come this far, didn't find my true self and my true family, just to watch you sacrifice yourself for my safety. Then what do you want me to do? Damon asked, his voice rough with emotion. I want you to fight like the alpha you are, Elena said firmly. I want you to remember that this pack needs you, that I need you, and I want you to trust that whatever happens, we'll face it together. Damon was quiet for a long moment, studying her face in the moonlight. Then he reached out and cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing over her skin with infinite tenderness. I love you too, he said softly. More than I thought it was possible to love someone. You walked into my life in the middle of a storm and changed everything. Good thing I like storms then, Elena said, leaning into his touch. Elena, Damon said seriously, if something does happen tomorrow, it won't. But if it does, he continued, I need you to promise me something. Promise me you won't try to face Marcus alone. Promise me you'll take the pack and run, find somewhere safe, and let the regional council handle the territorial dispute. Elena looked at him for a long moment, seeing the genuine fear in his eyes. Not for himself, but for her, and the pack he'd sworn to protect. I promise, she said finally, that I won't do anything stupid or reckless. It wasn't quite the promise he'd asked for, but Damon seemed to recognize that it was the best he was going to get. He pulled her closer, wrapping his arms around her as if he could shield her from all the dangers of the world through sheer force of will. They sat together in the quiet of the night, listening to the sounds of the forest and taking comfort in each other's presence. Elena tried to memorize everything about this moment, the feel of Damon's arms around her, the scent of pine and earth in the air, the way the moonlight painted everything in silver and shadow. There's something else, Damon said eventually. Something I should have told you before now. Elena felt a flutter of apprehension. What? The mate bond, Damon said carefully, can be formalized. Made permanent through a bonding ceremony that ties our souls together permanently. What would that mean? Elena asked, though she could feel through their existing connection that this was important to him. It would mean that even death couldn't truly separate us, he said quietly. Our souls would remain connected across all planes of existence. It's intense and irreversible. Elena felt her breath catch. Are you asking me to bond with you? I'm asking if you'd want to, Damon said. If we both survive tomorrow, if we have a future together, would you want that level of connection? Elena thought about it seriously. The idea of being soul bonded to Damon should have been overwhelming, terrifying in its permanence. Instead, it felt like the natural next step in a journey that had begun the moment their eyes met in the storm. Yes, she said simply. I want that. I want all of it. The bond, the future, the chance to build something lasting together. Damon's relief was so profound she could feel it through their existing connection. After tomorrow, then, when we've dealt with Marcus and secured our territory. After tomorrow, Elena agreed. They stayed on the porch until dawn, holding each other and talking quietly about their dreams for the future. By the time the sun rose, Elena felt more confident than she had since learning about the challenge. Whatever happened at Raven's Peak, she and Damon would face it together. And together, she was beginning to believe they could face anything. Chapter 9. Trial by Combat. Dawn at Raven's Peak was crisp and clear, with a bite in the air that spoke of winter's approach. Elena stood with her pack at the edge of the ancient fighting ground, her heart hammering against her ribs as she watched Damon prepare for the most important battle of his life. The neutral ground was a natural amphitheater carved into the mountainside, surrounded by towering pines that had witnessed countless such challenges over the centuries. Ancient stones marked the boundaries of the fighting circle, worn smooth by time and weather, but still radiating an aura of solemn authority. Marcus arrived with his pack just as the sun crested the horizon, his massive form moving with predatory confidence. He'd brought twice as many witnesses as they had, Elena noticed, a show of force designed to intimidate. But when she looked at her own pack, she saw determination rather than fear. They might be outnumbered, but they were united in ways Marcus's followers clearly weren't. Nervous? Luna asked quietly, moving to stand beside Elena. Terrified, Elena admitted, but not of the outcome. Damon's going to win. You sound very sure of that. Elena watched Damon stretch and center himself, preparing his body and mind for the fight ahead. Through their bond, she could feel his focus, his determination, and beneath it all, his absolute commitment to protecting what was his. I am sure, she said. Marcus made a mistake when he threatened me. He showed Damon exactly what he'd lose if he fails. The formal opening of the challenge was conducted by a neutral party, an elderly alpha from a distant pack who served as one of the regional arbiters. Elena listened as he recited the ancient words that would govern the combat, the rules that had been passed down through generations of shifters. This challenge is witnessed by the moon and stars, by the earth and sky, by the spirits of all who have fought and died on this sacred ground, the arbiter intoned. Let no wolf here present interfere with the will of the ancestors. Let the strongest lead, and let the defeated acknowledge the justice of their loss. Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. There was real power in those words, real magic that bound all present to honor the outcome regardless of their personal feelings. Damon and Marcus stepped into the circle, both shifting to their wolf forms as they crossed the stone boundary. Elena's breath caught as she saw them face each other. Damon sleek and dark as midnight, Marcus massive and burnished copper in the morning light. The size difference was even more pronounced in wolf form, and Elena had to fight down a surge of fear. I can feel you worrying, Damon's voice said in her mind, warm with affection despite the gravity of the situation. Stop it. You're distracting me. Sorry, Elena replied. Just be careful. Always am, he said, and she could hear the smile in his mental voice. I love you. I love you too. Now go show that bastard why this is our territory." The fight began without fanfare. One moment the two wolves were circling each other. The next they were locked in combat. Marcus's strategy was immediately apparent. Use his size and strength to overwhelm Damon quickly, before the smaller wolf could use his speed advantage. But Damon was too smart to play Marcus's game. He danced away from the larger wolf's initial charge, using his agility to stay just out of reach while landing quick, targeted strikes that slowly began to wear his opponent down. Elena found herself holding her breath as the battle continued. Her hands clenched so tightly her nails were drawing blood from her palms. Through the bond, she could feel echoes of Damon's pain when Marcus managed to land a blow, could sense his tactical thinking as he analyzed his opponent's weaknesses. Marcus was strong and experienced, but he was also arrogant. He'd clearly expected to end the fight quickly, and as it dragged on, Elena could see frustration beginning to affect his judgment. He started making increasingly reckless attacks, leaving himself open to counterstrikes that Damon was quick to exploit. The turning point came when Marcus, in a fit of rage, threw himself at Damon with such force that he couldn't adjust when the smaller wolf stepped aside at the last second. Marcus crashed into one of the boundary stones with bone-jarring impact, and for a moment, he lay stunned. Damon could have pressed his advantage then, could have gone for the killing blow while his opponent was vulnerable. Instead, he stepped back and waited for Marcus to regain his footing, a display of honor that earned murmurs of approval from the witnesses. Elena felt a surge of pride through the bond. This was why Damon was a true alpha, not because he could win through brutality, but because he could win while maintaining his principles. The fight continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Both wolves were showing signs of exhaustion now, their movements slower and less precise than they'd been at the beginning. But it was Marcus who was suffering more, his bulk working against him as his energy flagged. When the end came, it was swift and decisive. Marcus lunged forward in what was clearly meant to be a final, desperate attack. Damon met him head-on, but at the last second twisted aside and caught the larger wolf's throat in his jaws. For a moment, the two animals were frozen in tableau, predator and prey, victor and vanquished. Then Marcus went limp in submission, acknowledging his defeat in the most primal way possible. Elena felt such a rush of relief and triumph that her knees nearly buckled. Around her, her pack burst into howls of celebration, their voices echoing off the mountains in a song of victory. But it was the feeling of Damon's joy through their bond that really made her heart soar. Both alphas shifted back to human form as the arbiter approached to formally declare the outcome. Marcus looked older somehow, diminished by his loss in ways that went beyond the physical injuries he'd sustained. "The challenge is concluded," the arbiter announced. "Damon Ashworth has proven his right to lead through strength of arms and nobility of spirit. Let all present witness that his territorial claims are legitimate, and his pack leadership is acknowledged." Marcus stood slowly, blood trickling from several wounds but his spine straight with what dignity he had left. "I acknowledge the justice of my defeat," he said formally. "Damon Ashworth is the rightful alpha of this territory." He turned to Elena then, and she saw something in his eyes that might have been respect. "Elena Martinez, I acknowledge you as Luna of this pack and ask forgiveness for the insults I offered." Elena felt a moment of sympathy for the defeated alpha. Whatever his faults, he was accepting his loss with honor. "You're forgiven," she said simply. "I hope your pack finds peace on your own lands." Marcus nodded curtly, then gathered his followers and disappeared into the forest without another word. Elena watched them go, feeling a complex mix of emotions: victory, relief, and beneath it all, a profound sense that her life had just changed in ways she was only beginning to understand. Damon appeared at her side, pulling her into his arms despite the blood and dirt that covered his skin. "It's over," he said simply. "We're safe." "We're safe," Elena agreed, holding him tightly. "And now we can start building the future we talked about." "Starting with that bonding ceremony," Damon said, his voice rough with emotion and exhaustion. Elena pulled back to look at him, seeing the hope and love shining in his storm-gray eyes. "Starting with the bonding ceremony," she agreed. "I'm ready to bind my soul to yours, Alpha Ashworth." "And I'm ready to bind mine to yours, Luna Martinez," he replied. "For now and forever." As their pack surrounded them with congratulations and celebration, Elena felt the last piece of her new life click into place. She'd come to these mountains broken and lost, seeking nothing more than a place to heal. Instead, she'd found her true self, her true family, and a love deeper than anything she'd ever imagined possible. The storm that had brought her here was long over, but the new life it had made possible was just beginning. Chapter 10. Soul Deep. 3 days after the challenge, Elena stood in the same sacred circle where Damon had fought for their future, but now the space had been transformed. Candles flickered in holders carved from ancient wood, and the pack had woven flowers and herbs into intricate patterns that spoke of celebration rather than combat. The moon was full overhead, casting everything in silver light that made the ritual feel touched by magic. Elena wore a simple white dress that Luna had somehow procured, soft and flowing. It moved with her like a second skin and made her feel both powerful and feminine. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, woven with tiny white flowers that caught the moonlight like stars. "Are you ready?" Luna asked, approaching with a warm smile. As the senior female of the pack, she would be conducting the bonding ceremony. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life," Elena replied honestly. The past 3 days had been a whirlwind of preparation and healing. Damon's injuries from the fight were minor, and already healing with shifter speed, but Elena had insisted on tending to them herself, learning the particular intimacy that came with caring for one's mate. They'd spent hours talking about their hopes for the future, planning the life they would build together, and deepening the connection that had already become the foundation of Elena's new existence. Now, surrounded by the pack that had become her family, Elena felt truly ready to take the final step into her new life. Damon appeared at the edge of the circle, and Elena's breath caught. He wore simple black clothes that emphasized his natural grace, and the moonlight turned his dark hair silver at the edges. But it was the expression on his face, love and wonder and absolute certainty, that made her heart race. He crossed the circle to stand facing her, and Elena felt the bond between them humming with anticipation. Everyone they cared about was here to witness this moment, to celebrate the joining of two souls that had found their way to each other despite all odds. "We gather tonight under the light of the full moon to witness the bonding of souls," Luna began, her voice carrying clearly in the still night air. "Damon Ashworth, alpha of this pack, and Elena Martinez, who has claimed the role of Luna through strength and wisdom, have chosen to bind their lives together for all eternity." Elena felt tears prick at her eyes. 6 months ago, she'd been standing in a courthouse signing divorce papers, convinced that she was fundamentally unlovable. Now she was about to bind her soul to a man who saw her as she truly was and loved every part of what he found. "The bonding of souls is not entered into lightly," Luna continued. "It is a commitment that transcends death itself, a joining that cannot be undone by time or circumstance. Do you both understand the magnitude of what you choose?" "We do," Elena and Damon replied in unison, their voices steady with conviction. Luna smiled and gestured for them to join hands. Elena felt electricity shoot up her arm as their skin made contact, the bond between them flaring to life with new intensity. "Damon Ashworth," Luna said formally, "do you take Elena Martinez as your mate, your equal, And your soul bond? Do you promise to stand beside her in times of joy and sorrow, to protect her with your life, and to love her with every breath you draw? I do, Damon said, his eyes never leaving Elena's face. I promise to love her, protect her, and stand beside her for all eternity. My soul calls to hers, and I bind myself to her willingly and completely. Elena felt warmth spread through her chest at his words, at the absolute sincerity in his voice. Elena Martinez, Luna said, turning to her, do you take Damon Ashworth as your mate, your equal, and your soul bond? Do you promise to stand beside him in times of joy and sorrow, to support him in his role as alpha, and to love him with every breath you draw? I do, Elena said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. I promise to love him, support him, and stand beside him for all eternity. My soul calls to his, and I bind myself to him willingly and completely. Luna reached into a small pouch at her waist and withdrew a ceremonial knife that gleamed silver in the moonlight. The bonding of souls requires the mingling of blood, the sharing of life force. Are you prepared? Elena nodded, extending her hand palm up. The blade was sharp enough that she barely felt it as Luna made a small cut across her palm. Damon offered his hand next, accepting his own cut with stoic calm. Join your hands, Luna instructed. Let your blood mingle as your souls will mingle. Elena pressed her palm against Damon's, feeling their blood mix between their joined hands. The moment their wounds touched, power exploded through the bond between them. Elena gasped as she felt Damon's soul reaching for hers, felt their very essences beginning to intertwine in ways that went far beyond the physical. It was overwhelming and beautiful and terrifying all at once. Elena could feel Damon's memories flowing into her consciousness. His childhood, his struggles to become the alpha his pack needed, his lonely years before she'd stumbled into his life. In return, she felt her own memories flowing to him, sharing her pain and her growth and her journey to becoming the woman she was meant to be. By blood and soul, by moon and stars, by the ancient powers that govern all shifter kind, I pronounce you mated for life and beyond, Luna declared. What has been joined here cannot be sundered. What has been blessed here will endure for all eternity. The pack erupted in celebration, voices raised in howls of joy that echoed across the mountains. But Elena barely heard them. Her entire world had narrowed to the man standing before her, to the incredible sense of completeness that filled every cell of her being. Hello, wife, Damon said softly, and his voice was rough with emotion. Hello, husband, Elena replied, and the word felt like coming home. They kissed then, and Elena felt the bond between them settle into its permanent configuration. She was no longer Elena Martinez, lost and searching for her place in the world. She was Elena Ashworth, Luna of the Ashworth pack, soul-bonded mate of the strongest alpha she'd ever known. As the celebration continued around them, Elena marveled at the path that had brought her to this moment. A year ago, if someone had told her she would end up married to a werewolf in the mountains of Colorado, she would have recommended therapy. Now, she couldn't imagine any other life. No regrets? Damon asked, as if reading her thoughts. Elena looked around at the faces of her pack family, at the wilderness that had become her home, at the man who had shown her what it meant to be truly loved. Not a single one, she said firmly. This is where I belong. With you, with them. In this life we're building together. Damon smiled, the expression transforming his face from handsome to absolutely devastating. Good, he said, because I plan to spend the next several decades proving to you that you made the right choice. Several decades? Elena teased. Is that all? Well, Damon said, pulling her closer. We do have eternity to work with." As the pack celebration continued around them and the moon blessed their union from above, Elena felt perfect contentment settle in her bones. She'd come to these mountains seeking solitude and healing. Instead, she'd found adventure, family, and a love that would last beyond the end of time itself. The storm that had brought her here was a distant memory now, but Elena would always be grateful for the night her old life ended and her true life began. Chapter 11. Forever starts. Now, 6 months later, Elena woke to the sound of rain pattering against the windows and smiled before she even opened her eyes. Storms no longer frightened her. They reminded her of the night she'd found her way home. She stretched languidly, enjoying the warmth of the bed and the solid presence of her mate beside her. "Good morning, Luna," Damon murmured against her ear, his voice rough with sleep and affection. "Good morning, Alpha," she replied, turning in his arms to face him. Even after 6 months of marriage, the sight of him first thing in the morning still made her heart skip a beat. The past 6 months had been a period of growth and discovery for both of them. Elena had settled into her role as Pack Luna with a confidence that surprised everyone, including herself. She'd mediated disputes, helped integrate new members, and even negotiated a beneficial alliance with a neighboring pack. The graphic design skills from her old life had translated surprisingly well to the complex relationship management required of a pack leader. "What's on the agenda today?" Elena asked, though she already knew. The spring gathering was this weekend, an annual event where packs from across the region came together to renew alliances, settle disputes, and celebrate their shared heritage. Final preparations for the gathering, Damon confirmed. Jake and Tom finished setting up the guest cabins yesterday, and Luna has the feast menu finalized. We just need to do a final security sweep of the territory. Elena nodded, already mentally reviewing the guest list and making sure she remembered the names and pack affiliations of all the alphas who would be attending. This would be her first gathering as a Pack Luna, and she was determined to represent her family well. "Elena," Damon said, and something in his tone made her look at him more closely. "There's something we need to discuss before the others arrive." "What is it?" Elena felt a flutter of concern. In the month since their bonding, she'd learned to read Damon's moods through their soul connection, and right now he felt nervous, excited. It was hard to tell. "I got a call yesterday from the regional council," Damon said carefully. "They've been observing how well you've adapted to pack leadership, and they're impressed." "That's good, right?" Elena asked, though she had a feeling there was more to this conversation. "They want to offer you a position," Damon said. "As a mediator for inter-pack disputes. It would mean travel, responsibility for some of the most complex negotiations in shifter society." Elena felt her breath catch. "They want me to work for the council?" "Not work for them exactly. More like consult for them. You'd still be Luna of this pack first and foremost, but they'd call on your expertise when they needed someone with your particular skills." Elena sat up in bed, processing this unexpected development. 6 months ago, she'd been a failed graphic designer fleeing a broken marriage. Now the most powerful governing body in shifter society wanted her help managing their most difficult problems. "What do you think?" she asked Damon. "Honestly? Honestly?" Damon smiled, and Elena could feel his pride in her through their bond. "I think you'd be amazing at it. You have a gift for seeing all sides of a situation and finding solutions that work for everyone. And the council needs people like you, people who understand both the human and shifter worlds." "It would mean leaving the pack sometimes," Elena said, thinking through the implications. "It would mean representing our pack on the regional stage," Damon corrected. "Elena, this is a huge honor. Mediator positions are usually reserved for alphas with decades of experience." Elena felt a thrill of excitement at the thought of new challenges. New opportunities to use her skills in service of the broader shifter community. But more than that, she felt a deep sense of rightness about the offer. This was what she was meant to do: build bridges, solve problems, help others find their way to understanding. "I want to accept," she said finally, "if you're okay with it." "I'm more than okay with it," Damon said, pulling her down for a kiss that was full of love and pride. "I'm married to one of the most remarkable women in shifter society. How could I be anything but proud?" Elena laughed, feeling giddy with possibility. "So we'll tell the others at breakfast?" "We'll tell the others at breakfast," Damon agreed. "But first..." He rolled her onto her back, covering her body with his, and Elena felt desire flare between them like wildfire. Even after 6 months of marriage, the physical connection between them was as intense as ever, deepened by the soul bond that let them feel each other's pleasure as their own. "First," Elena agreed breathlessly, arching into his touch. "We celebrate privately." Later, as they lay tangled in the sheets and listened to the rain continue to fall outside, Elena marveled at how much her life had changed. She'd gone from being a woman who felt like she didn't fit anywhere to being someone who was valued by the highest levels of shifter society. More importantly, she'd found a place where she belonged completely. People who loved her exactly as she was. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if your car hadn't broken down that night?" Damon asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "No," Elena said without hesitation. "Because I think we would have found each other anyway. Maybe it would have taken longer, maybe the path would have been different, but we were meant to be together. The universe just helped us along." "Fate," Damon said with a smile. "Fate," Elena agreed. "And maybe a little bit of magic." As if summoned by their words, a flash of lightning illuminated the room, followed by a rumble of thunder that seemed to shake the very foundations of the house. Elena laughed, remembering another storm, another night when lightning had changed the course of her life forever. "I love storms now," she said, snuggling closer to Damon's warmth. "They remind me of beginnings." "This storm is different, though," Damon said, and Elena could hear the smile in his voice. "This one isn't bringing change. It's celebrating what we've already built." Elena lifted her head to look at him, seeing love and contentment and absolute certainty in his storm-gray eyes. "What we've built is pretty amazing, isn't it?" "The most amazing thing I've ever been part of," Damon agreed. "A pack that's stronger than ever, a territory that's secure and thriving, and a mate who continues to surprise me every single day. And a future full of possibilities," Elena added, thinking about the council position and all the adventures it might bring. "Speaking of the future," Damon said, and Elena felt a shift in his emotions through their bond. Nervousness again, but this time mixed with excitement and hope. "There's something else we should probably discuss." "What now?" Elena asked, laughing. "How many life-changing conversations can we have in one morning?" "This one's different," Damon said, his hand moving to rest on her flat stomach. "This one's about the future we might be creating without even realizing it." Elena felt her breath catch as understanding dawned. "Damon, are you saying—" "I'm saying that shifter senses are very good at detecting certain changes," he said gently. "And I've been noticing some changes in your scent lately." Elena's hand flew to her stomach, covering his. "I'm pregnant?" "I think so," Damon said softly. "We'd need to confirm it with Luna. But yes, I think we're going to have a baby." Elena felt tears spring to her eyes. Tears of joy and wonder, and a love so overwhelming it threatened to consume her. A baby. Their baby. A child who would grow up knowing exactly where they belonged, surrounded by family and pack and unconditional love. "Are you happy?" she asked, though she could already feel his emotions through their bond. "Happy doesn't begin to cover it," Damon said, his voice rough with emotion. "Elena, you've given me everything I never knew I wanted. A true partner, a strong pack, and now, a family of our own." Elena kissed him then, pouring all her love and joy and gratitude into the connection between them. When they finally broke apart, both of them were crying. "So," Elena said, wiping tears from her cheeks, "I guess this means I'll need to discuss maternity leave with the council." Damon laughed, the sound rich with happiness. "Somehow, I don't think they'll mind accommodating the first human-born Luna to join their ranks." "Former human-born," Elena corrected with a grin. "I'm all shifter now." "You're all mine now," Damon said, pulling her close again. "You and our baby and our pack and our future. All of it. Mine to protect and cherish for the rest of eternity." Elena settled into his arms, listening to the storm outside and feeling the new life growing within her. She thought about the woman she'd been a year ago. Broken, lost, convinced that she was fundamentally flawed. That woman could never have imagined the happiness Elena had found, the completeness that filled every corner of her existence. "I should probably get up," she said eventually. "Luna will want help with the final preparations, and I should call the council about their offer." "In a minute," Damon said, tightening his arms around her. "Let me hold my family for just a minute longer." Elena smiled and relaxed against him, in no hurry to leave the warmth and safety of their bed. Outside, the storm was beginning to move on, the thunder growing more distant and the rain gentling to a soft patter. But inside their room, wrapped in each other's arms, Elena felt like they existed in their own perfect pocket of time and space. "Damon," she said softly. "Hmm?" "Thank you." "For what?" Elena thought about all the ways her life had changed since that night on the mountain road. For seeing me when I couldn't see myself. For showing me what I was capable of. For giving me a family and a purpose and a love deeper than anything I ever imagined possible. "Elena," Damon said, his voice thick with emotion, "you have that backwards. You're the one who saved me. You walked into my life during a storm and brought the sunshine back." "Then I guess we saved each other," Elena said, feeling the truth of it settle in her bones. "I guess we did," Damon agreed. "And we're going to keep saving each other. Every day, for the rest of our lives." Elena closed her eyes and let herself sink into the perfect contentment of the moment. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new adventures, new opportunities to grow and serve and love. But today, right now, she was exactly where she belonged. The storm that had brought her to these mountains was long over, but Elena would always be grateful for the night her old life ended and her real life began. Because sometimes, she reflected, the most beautiful destinations were only reachable through the wildest storms. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, those storms didn't just bring you home, they brought you everything you never knew you were looking for. Outside, thunder rumbled one last time in the distance, as if the universe itself was acknowledging the perfect rightness of what had been built from chaos and chance, and the unstoppable power of true love. Elena smiled and held her family close, ready for whatever adventures lay ahead. After all, they had forever to figure it out together.